All right, welcome back for another episode of the Department Podcast with Justin, Joe, Clark, and Jesse. Today we're going to be talking about the NBA playoffs, but before we get into it, just a little bit of an announcement to make. So there's going to be no wrestling recap this weekend because Clark is going off to a wedding. So we're using that kind of our way to take a break and reshift our schedule a little bit for releases. So with all major sports kind of going on right now, and the four major ones we cover being, the NFL, WWE, MLB, and the NBA, we're kind of actually going to have a schedule, and we're going to try to adhere to it as best as possible. That way, then we just, release content more frequently and what sport comes out when, rather than it being a sporadic upload. So on Monday nights or Monday mornings will be the NFL right after, the Sunday night games. And then on Wednesday will be the MLB or the NBA. Did we agree on that yet?
I think so.
I don't know. It'll be it's probably the NBA or MLB, one of those two. And then on Friday will be the other side of that. And then on Sundays will then be wrestling, and we'll kind of just stagger that throughout. So that'll be our schedule. I'll edit in a fancy picture that I'll make. Will literally just be a text box with the dates, not dates, but days of the week that's being released. So that's kind of it. We're at 40 subscribers almost. So, make sure you subscribe because Clark will do the warm at 100 and I'll do the Tootsie Slide at 125. So that's making
100,
sure
that's 120.
125. That's a nice even number.
Right, I'm going to make 5 bot accounts really quickly then.
All right, that's fine. But
Okay.
that's just, little tidbits here and there on the podcast. So how's it going?
Sports. Sports is back. Every sport is back now.
Last night was what they called the sports solstice.
Oh,
It was
makes me happy.
all at once. Naomi Osaka got a big win last night in the U.S. Open, so I'm feeling really good about all of it.
Yeah, sports.
Well, so we're going to be talking about the NBA playoffs in this one. We'll start with the Raptors Celtics series going to Game 7 tonight when we're recording it on Friday. They play tonight, right? On Friday?
Yeah, they play tonight. Yes.
Yep.
Tonight.
What a wild Game 6 that was. It took 2 overtimes of just back and forth. Both teams were beating the living hell out of each other on defense. Fouls left and right. Both teams wanted the game, but ultimately the Raptors wanted it more and won the game, pushing it to 7 games. Wow. All I got to say is wow.
Wow's a word.
Yeah.
Another word I would like to say is referee. I feel like they played a big part in this. I really wanted the Raptors, so I can't discredit whatever here there because I feel like they're the worser team in a way going into the Eastern Conference Finals. But the referees played a big part in this. There was a lot of missed calls against the Celtics in overtime in the fourth quarter that should have went their way that just wasn't called in general. So I feel like the referees played a big part, which I hate to see in a basketball game because I don't want that to happen between two pretty decent teams going at it for the last spot in the Eastern Conference Finals.
I still think Boston's a little too young. I do.
Okay.
Kemba didn't show up. He's supposed to be the veteran player. All I'm gonna say is this is the only time I'm gonna say it because it makes sense. Kemba Walker is the starting point guard of the Boston Celtics in a game where they could have sent home the reigning NBA champions, and he had 5 points. Could you imagine if Kyrie Irving was the starting point guard of the Boston Celtics and had 5 points in a send-home game? Can you imagine what they would say about him?
If everything else in the playoffs was the exact same way, that's the trip to the finals right there.
So
that's a trip right to the finals.
Kemba played.
I want to hit on that.
He played 52 minutes and scored 4 points.
Yes,
Yeah,
5.
it was not good. Not a good showing.
Yeah, that was bad. Also, I get that Tatum is about to be a superstar and he's right there, but he made at least that I could count 3 really bad plays at the end of the game with the game on the line. Yeah. He threw the ball out of bounds trying to get it in the corner to Daniel Tice to take a 3.
Get it in the corner to Nick Nurse.
He already said that doesn't count. Tatum already said, I didn't think Nick Nurse was a player. I threw it out of bounds. So that's automatically out.
If Nick Nurse was wearing the colors of green or whatever, then yes, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, no, I agree.
No.
Yeah.
And also, he literally got an offensive foul in the last minute of the fourth quarter because he just threw an elbow. Full on threw one.
Yeah, that wasn't a flail. That was an intentional elbow right.
Yeah, just threw it right into him. So again, Tatum is a special player. He's great. He's going to be a superstar. He might be a superstar now. Is he a superstar in the playoffs? We're still going to see, because in that period, which honestly, Kemba Walker should be the one that is stepping up in that time because he's the veteran guy. When they gave it to Tatum, he shrunk a little bit. And so far, the best player on the Celtics is a player that I've been critical of over the years, and that's Jaylen Brown by far. Yeah. He's giving you consistent offense. He's giving you the best defense on the team. He's shooting, he's driving, he's doing everything. Meanwhile, everybody wants to talk about everybody else on the team. I think Daniel Tice gets more airtime than Jaylen Brown.
You know why?
And he's been the most impressive player on Boston, I think, for these playoffs, just throughout. And everybody just wants to talk about Tatum.
Now, if Gordon Hayward actually played, do you think that would have changed the outcome?
Yes.
The Raptors probably would have scored 14 more points. I mean, no. I don't. If Gordon Hayward doesn't play defense, and in the playoffs you need defense, Hayward would be sitting on the bench in crunch time.
Well, you got a point. No, you got a point. I didn't think about that. Yeah. Okay.
He can't play defense. You're off the court. I mean, we already seen if Kemba can't really play defense that well either. He's hustles and he tries, but his size doesn't allow him to play that good of defense. And that's how Lowry and Van Vliet are allowed to bully the backcourt because they already have a defender that can't defend. If you put Hayward out there, you now have a forward spot and a guard spot that can't defend. And you would have to take maybe Marcus Smart off the floor, and you're not taking Marcus Smart off the floor because he's been the second best player for the Celtics.
Do you think we see him if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, Hayward? Do you think we see
He'd have to play himself back into shape. I don't think they don't have the minutes to just waste in a Miami Heat series, I don't think. But they can't just play him back to get his minutes.
And even what I noticed with this, like the core of the Jaylen Browns, Jason Tatum's, Marcus Smarts, etc. Even before they got Hayward, they were a better team without him to begin with. And when they added Hayward in free agency, was it 2 years ago or something like that? It kind of disrupted.
Like 4 now.
God, it feels.
Well, it only feels like he played 2 because of all the injuries he's had.
Well, that's the thing. He came the same year that Kyrie came when they traded him.
Yeah.
He joined and then immediately got hurt. And ever since then, I mean, it's been sad, but he has never been able to really play himself back into that big role without getting hurt again. So every time it feels like he might be getting back and might be getting better again, something else happens. And then they have to risk regular season wins and losses and their seeding because they're trying to play this guy back in. That was a huge problem when Kyrie was there, was a lot of the guys felt like, why is Gordon Hayward our number one option on offense when at this point he's the third best offensive player? Why is Brad Stevens drawing up every single play for Gordon Hayward? So if he comes back and they give him significant minutes for the Miami Heat series, Miami's going to the finals. There's no question in my mind. You cannot tinker with your lineup to try to give this guy minutes when he's not healthy and hasn't been playing in the Eastern Conference Finals. That you don't do that.
Yeah. Cool. I agree. I see no false statements there.
Joe, what do you got?
Absolutely. I think that it would be impossible to just put Gordon Hayward into the fold in a situation like this, especially when, he has not had really any time to gel with this team. So that's out. That is completely out for the next series. I don't even think he would get big minutes even if he does play. I am really looking for Jason Tatum to step up and have his Dirk Nowitzki game tonight in Game 7. We have seen him step up before. 2 years ago against LeBron James and the Cavaliers, they did not win a series, but Jason Tatum was the guy. He was exciting. He was electrifying. He was younger than I think any of us here. It is now time for him, if he wants to be regarded as the superstar, as this guy, to take over tonight's game. But the biggest problem and the biggest takeaway from this series is that Nick Nurse is establishing himself as possibly the best coach in the National Basketball Association. And I don't think that's that hot of a take at this point.
No.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the lowest you can put him is like 3 at this point.
If even that.
I still put Popovich up there as long as he's active. Popovich is probably number 1.
See, Popovich is like kind of like Tom Brady in a way. He's the greatest coach of all time, but like not the best right now in a way.
I think Popovich still could be the best right now if he had
the talent.
Team. Yes.
Okay, I agree with that.
I mean, they were still a playoff contention team with that team. So I still have Popovich up there. I do think Nurse is a better coach than Stevens, which 2 years ago, people were just ready to call Brad Stevens the greatest coach of all time.
And now's the time for Stevens to actually live up to that hype if he can take his team then to the conference finals finally. Because he's had this hype around him, and Danny Ainge, acquiring all the assets to build a super team, and they haven't been able to even sniff the conference finals. Now is the time for them to, justify that hype.
Yeah, justify that hype, but at what cost? They could have ended this series so many games ago, and they're just tiring out their players even more when it's not even necessary. I still won't even put them up there.
But the entire shift of this series, which I still think, and this is how impressive of a coach, of a coaching performance Nick Nurse has done over Brad Stevens, is that they have been outplayed really for these 6 games. The 3 games that were won by Toronto have been by the skin of their teeth, and the Celtics looked pretty handed in their three wins. But to go for and pretty much shake up your entire identity and take the big guys off the floor for significant minutes this late into the series is a very bold move that not a lot of coaches can get away with, and it has worked absolutely outstanding. And you can say what you want about how terribly Kemba Walker has played, but Nick Nurse has put them in a position to absolutely shut down that Celtics offense.
So speaking of the next game then, who you guys got? Because Game 6 was a massive momentum shifter for me, I think, for the Toronto Raptors, just because, you could say all the calls in the world from the refs, but they kept fighting, and they showed that they're still a championship caliber team, even without Kawhi Leonard there.
I picked the Raptors in our last episode to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm still going with the Raptors. That's it.
I think that, like, as I've previously said, I commend Nick Nurse. I commend him a lot. I think that this Raptors team is fun. I think they're really, really deep, probably deeper than the Celtics. But tonight is about a star stepping up in Game 7, and it's Jason Tatum.
And it's Pascal Siakam.
It's time.
Siakam needs to have a big game.
I think he's due.
Because he's due. Yeah. I mean, and that's great job from Stevens from trying to, limit him as much as possible. But we'll see. I really do think it comes down to who has the bigger night of maybe Tatum or Siakam, which at that point, give me Tatum. I think the Celtics need to win this, because if they don't, it's going to be lingering over them all offseason, which is already shortened. And they have to go into next season knowing at Game 3, they had a 2-point lead with not even a full second left on the clock. And they lost the series.
Yeah.
Not only that, but Jason Tatum, not as a scorer, but his passing is going to play a big role tonight. I do not foresee Kemba Walker having this bad of a game. Just statistically impossible. Statistically impossible.
For me, if it's coming down to Tatum and Siakam, I got to go with Siakam. He's shown up and had big games in the playoffs before, and he has a little bit of a better supporting cast also around him. And also, it's just a demoralizing Game 6 loss. It can really shift the series. So I got to go with Toronto.
All right, we're split. I like it.
So keeping it in the Eastern Conference then, on the flip side of things, the Miami Heat got it done against the Bucks in 5 games, sent Giannis back to Milwaukee, Now the
For
Bucks
now.
really, not the Bucks, the Heat are just sitting back and enjoying and waiting to see who they play. You know, who's the better matchup, Boston or Toronto for Miami then?
Toronto is by far the better matchup
Yeah.
for them to win.
I agree.
Definitely.
That's why I'm rooting for
Because
Toronto.
Toronto has good players, and they're a really well-coached team. But where they lack the most is in the forward spot, because Pascal usually, when they go into small ball, Pascal plays the 5, and then Anunoby can play the 4. And while Anunoby has been, fantastic in the playoffs, the Heat can get away with guarding him a little bit different because they have so many good perimeter defenders. So Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet are going to have to work harder for their baskets. Because when they're playing Boston, Marcus Smart, fantastic defender. Nobody's saying otherwise. Should be a defensive player of the year. Consider it. Probably one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Kemba, on the other hand, is not at all. Miami has multiple guys out there that they can switch onto and play all across, including Bam from going through screens. Bam Adebayo can switch onto guards.
Bam can do it all.
Them.
Bam can literally do it all. It's insane.
So
it's insane watching him play.
Boston has scarier forwards that Miami would have a harder time guarding.
I agree.
And I think they also run a better offensive rotation as opposed to Toronto. So if I was a Heat fan, I had my fingers crossed for Toronto pulling it out.
I think Jimmy Butler would expose Boston in a 7-game series.
Wow.
I think I think that would be just such a great matchup for him. If you do get Boston against the Heat, it would be a very interesting matchup. I think it would, if the games probably would be of more quality. You're getting a couple young teams really at kind of similar points with similar expectations right now. And I think that a Heat Raptors series would kind of be, it would be pretty much the Raptors, I think, would win it pretty handily.
Really?
I would have a lot of confidence in the Raptors in that series.
I think the Celtics are more deep, honestly. And it favors them against the Heat, but I don't know. They're both tough. They're both going to be tough matchups. That's all I know. They're both two very good basketball teams playing another good basketball team. So
yeah, we'll know tonight basically on who it is, and then by next podcast, which will probably be Wednesday for the NBA,
we'll see game 1.
We'll be talking about the Eastern Conference Finals. Either matchup is very appealing, though, and really, I'm just happy any of those 3 teams are getting back to the finals.
Yeah. Like it's been a while for the Heat in Boston.
Yeah, well, the Heat, they've won more frequently, but Boston, I feel like they need to make it to the finals the most.
I agree.
For credibility reasons, but also just for that team itself.
Yeah.
I actually think out of the 3 teams, who has the most urgency to get to the finals would probably be Toronto. Because number 1, they have to prove that they could do it without Kawhi. And number 2, I don't think their window is as wide as the Celtics and the Heat. I think conceivably the Celtics and the Heat, with both of their young cores, have multiple years left. The Raptors, outside of Siakam, there's a lot of veterans on that team. There's probably a little bit more urgency there.
I think the Heat have the most urgency. Because the Heat need to prove that they can win to try to get that free agent, first off, if they really want to go for Giannis. And number 2, Butler's not a young guy. They have a young core, sure, but Butler's a little bit older of a guy, and we've already seen he's not shooting as well as he used to. He drives, he gets fouled, he gets free throws. But eventually, that might wear down. And Butler might only have another year or 2 at his peak of being a lockdown defender while still also being a number 1 to number 2 option on offense. If that's only going to be available for another year or 2, they need to get a free agent immediately.
Well, I think, we'll start with the Jimmy Butler point. I think that he can still, his defensive ability will carry with him for years to come. I don't think that's going away. Yes, he's not going to be an offensive force. But I think he could be a solid veteran option, kind of like what we see in Toronto, how they have your Gasols and your Lowrys. They are not a number one option. They should not be a number one option. More of a Marc Gasol type, but he could be that sort of guy on a championship team. And also, they don't need to prove that they can win to get a big free agent. After the Nets and the Clippers both got bounced in round one last year and signed big free agents and brought in complete overhaul superstars, I don't think the Heat need to make an Eastern Conference Finals in order to be in the running for a guy.
Well, the Heat need to prove their core. The Nets had pretty much already proven their core.
It's proven at this point.
I think it's proven after defeating the Bucks.
Yeah.
Honestly, you beat the team with the best record in the league.
The number one seed.
Yeah, literally the best record.
But again, you have an aging guy in Butler, so that core that you keep talking about is a little bit older and a little bit worse than I think people are looking at. When the Clippers got Kawhi and they traded for Paul George, Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, and Pat Beverly, none of those guys were on the back end or even star players. They weren't joining there because of those guys. They were getting 2-star players anyway. If you want to look at it in the Nets case, they had young guys like LeVert and like Allen and all of them. And then they were looked at as joining that core. The Heat are different because it's like you're joining Jimmy Butler and a young core, but we don't know how good that young core is going to be. Can that young core get you to the playoffs without Jimmy Butler? They didn't the year before.
But that young core didn't have all of the pieces last year that it has this year.
I agree, but also some of those pieces can be falling off. Dragic probably isn't going to be there again.
Dragic's probably gone.
Jimmy Butler's 30. You make it sound like he's Vince Carter.
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler is 30 and played with Tom Thibodeau for how many years? Don't give me that BS. Luol Deng was 30 when he left too. And what happened to Luol Deng?
Yeah, but Jimmy Butler's a lot better player than Luol Deng ever was.
I disagree. Luol Deng was a 2-time All-Star when he was playing with Thibodeau. Don't ever disrespect what Luol Deng did with Tom Thibodeau. Jimmy Butler, great player. He has played excessive minutes in his career.
Yeah, but you make it sound like his legs are just going to fall out from underneath him.
That's what happens. That's literally what happens. Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, Derrick Rose. You're saying like, oh, Jimmy Butler's not them. Why not?
Rose tore his ACL, and Joakim Noah was a 7-foot center. You're not going to break down as a small forward quick.
Okay, give me the Luol Deng excuse.
He's not a shooter. He's a driver.
That's what Luol Deng was.
Big difference. Jimmy Butler is not this young, seasoned, spring chicken. Guy's had a lot of wear and tear on him.
He's got so many minutes on him.
You make it sound like next season he'll be Dirk running up the court.
He could, in a year or two, he could very well be super run down.
Yeah,
Luol Deng got sent to Miami, had a terrible year, somehow still got paid from the Lakers, hasn't been viable in how many years? And it was like that. It was a quick drop-off.
Okay.
So that's how it will be. It won't be a steady decline.
But that's not guaranteed for every player, though.
Okay, but I already gave you 3 examples of how it worked. And you're saying, oh, well, it won't work that way. Give me an example of how it won't. Taj Gibson, another one. Give me an example of a guy that played – give me an example of a guy that played excessive minutes with Tom Thibodeau and then went on to have a nice, long career.
It's very nice that Jimmy Butler has this reputation as a guy who is bench pressing 500 pounds at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's very nice he takes care of himself. It's going to catch up. It's absolutely going to catch up.
Right. I think it will catch up. I do agree with that, but not at the rate that you guys are saying it. I think it will catch up, though. It will. I'm with you guys that it will.
2 or 3 more good years of Jimmy Butler is all the Heat need. You make it sound like next year he's going to be complete shit. That's not going to happen.
Never said next year. I said 2 years from now. Their window is within a year or two, which is a tight window. They need to probably get another guy because I think we're kind of all in agreement right now. The Heat are not winning the finals. This is not a finals winning team. Okay. So
they could win the East, but they're not going to win.
With that in the thought process, they need another player. If they need another player, it's going to be a year or two that they have this window with Jimmy Butler as the number 1. And then moving forward, is Tyler Herro maybe a number 1 option? He could be, but also he's a rookie. So let's not invest incredible stock into that. I think Bam is an incredible player. He's a great defensive player. Let's see his offense maybe develop a little bit more. They still do have these question marks while also still being a very good team. But that window we've seen windows can close a lot faster than we think they will.
Yeah. Well, the team whose window is open right now, but the trailing are the Denver Nuggets. At this point, we're basically setting up for an LAC Western Conference Finals because there's no way Denver can come back down 3-1.
That's done.
Well,
Yeah,
I will make an amendment. I do think, yes, this is possibly okay. Yeah, it's open now, but this is not. Denver's gearing up for their window to open. We're a little early on Denver right now. They are blossoming. They will become a beautiful, beautiful flower. But right now, close the window.
Yeah,
Next year we'll have some fun, but yeah.
I agree. I agree 100%. Give it a couple years, they're to be great. Right now, like Justin said, LA, Battle of LA. That's it. That's it.
Are we calling a Game 5?
Probably, maybe they get to 6. I called it when it was 1-1.
I think
I was like, there's no way they're beating the Clippers. They don't have enough production from their forwards to compete realistically with the Clippers.
Kawhi is good. It's over. Kawhi is just calling like it. We give him credit for carrying, whether he has or he hasn't. But this
Yes.
I mean, in years
his
past,
second best. Oh, okay. I was going to say his second best player has been Morris, so he's been carrying.
In years past, you give Kawhi credit for carrying, not carrying Spurs, the Raptors. The very intricacies to those arguments. But right now, we are actually seeing Kawhi Leonard carry a basketball team.
Carry on his entire back.
Paul George, people have kind of just laid off on Paul George because, I mean, he had one kind of good game. He had been poor the last 2.
Horrible.
He's been poor.
Horrible.
Well, and we seen when Kawhi had his bad game, Denver won.
Yeah.
Like if that's the thing that scares me about both LA teams is if one, well, and more with the Clippers, because if Paul George isn't on, we've seen the Clippers can still win with Kawhi Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
Can the Lakers win if Anthony Davis and LeBron both aren't on? We've yet to see that. But if Kawhi has a bad game, chalk it up to the Lakers because nobody else on the Clippers besides maybe Lou Williams can step up into that role at this time.
If I'm a Lakers fan, my first fear is Kawhi, but I think you can just kind of just assume that you're just not going to be able to stop him. But my second fear is not Paul George. It is Lou Williams. He could have a couple huge games against Los Angeles.
Playoff Rondo would need to show up in full effect on the defense.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen him play good a couple games now. He needs to continue to play well and play defense, especially on that backcourt of Lou Williams.
So then it basically sounds like we're taking the Lakers, packing that series up against the Rockets, and just moving on to the West. Like
pack them both up.
I think that can go one more game, maybe. Lakers.
But the Rockets needed to even that series up 2-2 last night. And when I flipped it on from like the quarter break or commercial during football, and they were down like 25, got it back to like 8, and then got blown out by 18 to end the game. They can't come back at that point. Both teams are down 3-1. It's hard. Obviously LeBron did that, but
I am so disappointed. I thought Houston would put up a fight, but what I forgot is that Mike D'Antoni refuses to change anything, to make any adjustments. You watch all of these other really great teams right now. The Lakers offensively, versatile. They can do multiple things. They try multiple things, several ways to score. The Clippers, they mostly go through Kawhi late in the game, but they have a lot of ways they can beat you on offense. The Raptors seem like a one-trick pony. Have James Harden try to go to the line. Have James Harden shoot poorly. It's all just disgusting. It is watching James Harden and Russell Westbrook together is so infuriating.
So
when you really put your faith into them. I really put my faith into them. And this just keeps going back to me believing that even if Chris Paul played game 7 in the 33 consecutive missed 3-point game, they still would have lost.
So is it safe to say then that the Rockets' window is almost closing then as currently constituted? Because they've literally exhausted every single option for James Harden, and they can't do anything left. They have no assets to trade. They have no players.
I think Mike D'Antoni takes a lot of the blame here.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's also the roster construction of they decided, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they were going all in on James Harden, and that was it. That was the only thing they were going to do was just try to build around Harden. Forget the draft picks, forget the players that we have, everything is just an asset except for James Harden. And then in game 4, Harden shot below 20% for the 8th time in his playoff career, just playoffs. LeBron, Kevin Durant, Kobe, and Michael Jordan have all combined to do that 2 times in their entire playoff careers. LeBron made it almost every year. KD made it pretty much every year. Jordan made it most years. And Kobe, after Shaq left, had a little bit of a downfall, but mostly made it for most of his career. And they did that all 2 times combined. And Harden has done it 8 times. And then you look at the game and you're like, well, wait a minute. He shot below 20%, but he still has 21 points because it's the free throws, because he attempted 20 free throws. And then
it's ugly to watch.
You look just look at the 2020 playoffs and match him and Westbrook up next to each other. And Westbrook's coming back from an injury. And everybody and their mother just wants to pile on Russell Westbrook. Do you know who was bad last night? Not Russell Westbrook.
Not Russ. Yeah.
He was 8 for 16. He banged 3 of 8 from 3.
Yeah.
That's 37.5%.
Half of those points were put up when the game was over. He is not immune from criticism, but James Harden deserves the slack.
James Harden deserves so much more criticism than he actually gets.
I agree.
Because everybody always wants to pile on whoever his second player is. Like, I don't know why there's this idea of like LeBron when it's like, oh, if whoever LeBron plays for wins, it's because of LeBron. And if they lose, it's not because of LeBron. But that's how it is with Harden at this point. It's, Harden shot 2 of 11 and Westbrook shot 8 of 16. Damn, Westbrook just really doesn't fit.
Now, Jesse, I am going to defer to your expertise on this one. Because last night, we're sitting here, we're watching Anthony Davis dog them. Dog them. And I'm thinking, this team had, and granted, I'm a bigger Clint Capella fan than most. He really played very well against my beloved Warriors. It would
have been nice for the Rockets to have a.
Why on God's green earth did they get rid of Clint Capella?
They decided
to run.
They wanted to go small ball with the tallest guy on the floor being Robert Covington. And honestly, it might have worked if Anthony Davis didn't finally decide he would play center a little bit. It might have worked. They might have gotten away with it. But if Anthony Davis didn't decide, okay, fine, I guess I'll take PJ Tucker in the post and score on him so many times.
But see, that's my issue with the Rockets, that one little simple move of literally moving Anthony Davis from the forward spot to the center literally just shut them down completely.
But these are moves that Mike D'Antoni won't make.
Yeah, they're not a well-coached team.
Or he didn't even have the opportunity because they went all in on the small ball. But I mean, if he wanted to put a defender out there, who was he going to do? Tyson Chandler?
But you really don't think that Mike D'Antoni has a big part in this roster construction?
Oh no, Mike D'Antoni has a huge part, but also they're gearing up for D'Antoni to leave. So
they haven't extended him yet, right?
No, they're not going.
And they shouldn't.
It's pretty well known they're not going.
They've been trying to get rid of him for like 2 years.
And that's nice and all. That's great until you realize what other offense is going to work with this team.
It won't. You'll have
7 seconds.
They'll have to completely tear it down and rebuild it, but they have
what
no
can
assets.
You tear down?
Well, they have no assets to restart from, and no one's really going to want. I mean, granted, you could move Russell Westbrook, but you're getting a hell of a lot worse than what you gave up for him.
You can move Westbrook, but you're not getting a positive gain on that.
That's what I'm saying. You're getting a lot worse. So the Rockets.
I have a question.
Make it quick. We got 2 minutes.
Which Houston trade is worse? Hopkins to the Cardinals for David Johnson and some picks, or the shipload of first-round picks and Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook? What's going to go down in bigger infamy?
The Chris Paul trade, just because it'll cripple the Rockets longer than the Hopkins trade would for the Texans.
Agreed. I need to see maybe if they can maybe try to flip Russell Westbrook for something, but I don't think there's a team out there that would trade for Westbrook on that contract.
Not if
unless Houston attached something to it, which they don't have anything to attach.
Yeah. Well, we just got to wait and see what happens. LA in the West will probably be the matchup. Boston and Toronto, that'll be a slugfest game 7. See who the Heat play. But Clark, you got about a minute, so make it quick.
All right, let's make it quick. Guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Leave a 5-star review. Leave a comment. Let us know your favorite part of the show. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at @Department_pod. We'll see you in the next episode.